there was a nurse that would come in my room, and the fear that I felt and the just pure rage and hate and everything negative, everything dark, this nurse carried around with him. And I would have these little brief glimpses of cognitive ability. That this is one of those times is when that nurse would come in. And I'm sure it was because the evil and the hate and the darkness and the rage just came from this nurse. And I knew he hated me. He hated my guts. He wanted to kill me, and I knew it. The weird thing was he had the face of my husband, which I thought was odd. I dreaded him coming in my room, and he would come when never had another nurse with him. And looking back, I can see now that he never gave me medications. He never even physically touched me. He would come in the room, in my hospital room. He would look at the monitors and stuff. He would look at that stuff. And then he would get really close to my left ear, and he would whisper these weird, sickening, sweet lies, like that he loved me and, oh, you're doing great. And he would whisper these things in my ear. And some of it I don't remember. I think it was so creepy to me that I blocked it out even. It was very profound, terrified me. And I remember trying to, act like I was asleep because I didn't want him to know I was awake. I couldn't understand. I didn't know this person. Why did he hate me so much? Why did he want to kill me? And why hadn't he done it yet? I thought it was really strange. But you have to understand that these cognitive moments I had were there was a couple seconds and then I'd be out, out again. This took place shortly, maybe when they started slowly cutting back on the medications, trying to wake me up after when they first saw a little bit of hope that I may be turning a corner. But they had thought that many times, and then I'd go back down the other way. And so I'm not sure when it occurred, but it was during the time that I was in a coma. And so that's one of the things I remember. Another thing is I woke up in the middle of the night, and I knew it was the middle of the night because it was dark in my room. And mind you, I'm on medications that are supposed to not allow you to remember anything, that you're not supposed to be able to move. Paralytic drugs so that I wouldn't pull something out for my own safety, And I shouldn't have woken up. I was in a coma. It's not like you wake somebody up who's sleeping. But I woke up this night and I didn't know where I was. I knew immediately that I could not breathe. I couldn't breathe. There were alarms going off in my room and lights were flashing and there was this beeping, all these different beeping machines. There was machines everywhere, but I didn't have time to think about where am I, what's going on. I knew I needed air. I needed oxygen, and I needed to find a way to get some right now. I couldn't understand why I couldn't take a breath. I didn't understand that. And again, I got that knowing, and it was the Lord, because a little bit above my hospital bed and to my left, I noticed there was this accordion type hose tube, and I could hear the air coming out of it. And I just knew that I had to get that. It sounds crazy. I had to somehow get that tube and put it in my neck. How would I have known to do that? The last thing I remember, I wasn't intubated. I wasn't, I was not aware that any of this had happened, or how long I'd been there, or any knowledge of these machines or what they did, or I had no clue. But I had that knowing again. I knew I had to get that tube and somehow get it in my neck. And that was what I had to do. And I knew it. Now I know again that it was the Lord, speaking to me, guiding me. But I tried to raise my right arm and realized my wrists were tied down to the bed. Thankfully, I did have some leeway there. So I slowly raised my arm, and it was like it wasn't my arm. It was like it was somebody else's arm. My brain was trying to tell somebody else's arm to move, is what it was like, because it was like the connection was messed up or something. Again, I was on those paralytic drugs, so I'm sure that had a lot to do with it. On top of that, it felt like it weighed about 500 pounds. And so I made this kind of wild, very uncoordinated grab towards that accordion tube, and I thud, my arm just fell down on my abdomen, and I didn't even come close, I don't think. Of course, everything was real blurry too, so my eyes wouldn't focus. It was dark, except for the lights blinking and flashing. And I was very weak, so I said, Lord help me, because I knew I had to get that hose. with the air. Well, I made another attempt, and this time I at least hit the tube with my hand. I felt it, and it kind of moved over there. And the Lord knew I needed just a little bit of confidence or realization that it could be done, because that gave me the strength to try one last time. And I knew this was going to be my last attempt, because I just had nothing, no strength in me left to try again. So again, I said, "Oh Lord, please help me, please help me." And I raised my arm, and to my shock and joy, I had that tube in my hand. I stuck it in my neck. How did I know to do that? I don't know. Well, I do know now, but at the time I didn't have any knowledge of knowing that's what I would need to do, myself. That came from the Lord. It was just the Lord guiding me. He knew what I needed. At that time, I had to believe. I had to trust. I had to have faith, because on my own, I wouldn't have known to do anything. I would have died. I would have died. And that was, that was in the works. It was without the Lord intervening, I would have died. So then I remember I just had this, relief isn't even the word. I felt the oxygen going to my lungs, and I was just out. I was out. The alarms were still going off. The lights were still flashing. Nobody ever came. And it just breaks my heart, Vlad, because I just wonder how many times somebody's been in that position like that. And I was blessed because I heard his voice. But how many people didn't hear his voice because they didn't know him? Maybe he tried to reach him, but tried to tell them. But because they didn't recognize his voice, they didn't, have a relationship with him, they died, and they died without the Lord. And that's sad to me. Anyway, so I lived, but I'm sure that night, if not before, if the Lord hadn't given me that miracle that night of telling me what I needed to do, give me that knowing, spoke to me in that voice that I recognized in that knowing, I'm sure they would have got a phone call in the middle of the night or early in the morning that I had passed away. And nobody would have ever questioned it, because I was very sick. And the doctors told my family, you're just prolonging her suffering at this point. That's all you're doing. You're prolonging her suffering. She hasn't made any improvements. She's actually getting a little worse. Her lungs are so scarred and deeply scarred. There's no coming back from that. Lungs that look like this, and they showed an x-ray of my lungs. They said they can't repair themselves. They can't heal. They will never heal from that. And they were starting to get, from what I understand, and from hospital records, they were starting to get a little irritated with my family, I think. And I think that they were just thinking, oh yeah, well, no one wants to, they're in denial. Nobody wants to admit that their loved one isn't going to be here anymore. And, but they don't know Jesus, Anyway, yeah, I'm sure I would have been another statistic. But anyway, then going back to my encounter with Jesus, which was the first thing I thought of when I did finally wake up completely from this coma I had been in for almost 2 months. During that encounter with him, the last thing I remember him telling me, and it's kind of funny because when he told me, it just had such a huge, meaningful impact on me. And it was like earth shattering. It was amazing, and I just hung on the words. But this is what he told me. He said that the time on the earth was running out. He said, I'm coming back soon. Now is not the time for people to be foolish with their salvation. And he said, heaven is real. I am real, and hell is real. And he said, tell everyone, is what he told me. And so it was, when he said it, just carried so much impactful, eye-opening, impactful message. When I repeated it, or conveyed it, I should say, I didn't repeat it right at first, but when it came from me, I just thought, what? That's not the impact it was supposed to have. Because that's not the impact I got from the Lord, when he said it to me, it just meant so much. But coming from me, it just sounded like what a disappointment. It just didn't sound like it carried the same punch, as it did when it came from him. But when I did finally wake up completely from that coma and had turned a corner, and the doctors were and still are amazed. They can't believe it. They said themselves, I was a miracle, and they've never ever seen anybody as sick as I was. Leave the hospital not in a body bag is what they said. But the first thing, Vlad, that I wanted to relay was that message from the Lord, because I didn't want to disappoint him. I wanted him to be, happy with the way I handled his message and the importance I placed on that message. And I still want to do my best to tell everyone, like he told me. However, it does not carry the same weight that it did for me when he said it. But my daughter was sitting next to my bed when I woke up, my youngest daughter. It was her birthday. I didn't know it then, but she said, Mom, and she looked very surprised to see me awake and focusing on her, like my tracking with my eyes and stuff. And I just shook my head and she said, Mom, do you know where you are? And I shook my head again. And she said, do you know how long you've been here? And I didn't know. But in my head, I was thinking, well, maybe a week, it's probably been a few days. She said, Mom, you've been here almost 2 months. And I just couldn't believe it. Because I was in that nothingness. And there was no time. I just couldn't believe it'd been that long. And so I was kind of shocked. But knowing that, the first thing I communicated to her was about that message from Jesus, because I was afraid that if something else happened, I want to make sure I did what he told me to do, that I obeyed him. It's very important to me, and it still is. But like I said, I don't have the impact that I wish I did that he had when he said it. But you know what? I was blessed and grateful, thankful to be here, grateful every day. For a little while, I did have some survivor's guilt because I didn't feel like I was worthy to deserve such an awesome experience, but we might have questioned the Lord, so I'm just going to make the best of it. And that's what I do. That's my testimony.
Wow. Powerful. Correct me if I'm wrong, Diane. I think you said on the phone that when Jesus was telling you about that time is running out, he had like an hourglass in his hand, right?
Yeah, he showed me in my head, he gave me a vision. It was just a big giant hourglass with the sand was coming out, at the bottom, and there wasn't much sand left in there. I remember that. And while he showed me that, he was telling me the time on the earth is running out. And he said it like it was very serious and urgent that people realize this. They better realize this because I from him, I got how important it was, but I don't have that ability to do that like he does. But I'm telling you and everybody that will listen, the time is running out and we are running out of time. He's coming back soon. You don't want to be caught without Jesus.
If you think about it, tomorrow is not promised to anyone, right? It's like all you have is now. You don't even have tomorrow. That's not guaranteed. But I don't want to put you on the spot guessing how much time we have. But I'm curious, have you thought more about that? And, no one knows the day or the hour. But if you had to take a wild guess, is it like decades, just a few years from now?
I don't think, I'm in my 50s and I don't think I will. I think my retirement is going to be in heaven. That's what I think. I feel like a lot of us that are alive now will see the end of things as we know it.
It's interesting. My father, he's in his 70s and he believes that he will see the Jesus' return before he crosses over. Yeah, it's getting late. It's getting serious.
He said he's coming back soon. He knows it's soon. He doesn't, yeah, I wish I knew that, but I'm glad I don't, because then people wouldn't practice faith and they wouldn't, get their lives right until the last second, and I think that's why he took a lot of that, what we talked about, our conversations, from my memory, because there's lessons I have to learn. There's faith I need to practice. There's things I'm supposed to accomplish while I'm here. And if he gives me all the answers, then that's kind of like cheating on the test, So
I love that he said, share with everyone. And how cool that you are doing just that. You're on this podcast sharing this with everyone. You're warning people that you were created for such a time as this.
Well, thank you. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having your podcast. I truly enjoy everybody's testimony I've heard on there. Incredible. And are you surprised, Vlad, that there seems to be an increase? Is that what it is? Or is it just that we have more access, like, through the technology and things that we're able to hear these testimonies now more. What do you think?
It's interesting. I had my face-to-face encounter with Jesus 9 years ago. I mean, I had a face-to-face encounter with him in a dream, and he told me that he was going to help me with this podcast. And Diane, I thought it was going to happen the next day. In fact, this morning I found another YouTube channel called God's Voice Day that I started 9 years ago. I have like 4 episodes on there. But every time I try to start it, it just never took off, and I get discouraged and just turn it off. But now, more than ever, in 4 months, today, actually, before this phone call, crossed 50,000 subscribers. It's just taking off so fast, and it's the right time. But to your point that the time wasn't right. Now it is right. The time is right. And all these testimonies are coming up. People are calling me. I have more testimonies than I have time to cover them all. And there's so many testimonies.
So do you think are there more testimony? Are people experiencing these things more now because of the time we live in? Or do you think it's just that we have access to them more now?
I think both. But there's something about, I think there are more experiences now. God has given these experiences to people to edify our faith, to encourage us. And testimonies are powerful. They give people a lot of hope, especially right now. People need hope. Let's talk about those golden tickets. It's interesting. When you shared with me on the phone those golden tickets being prayers going up to heaven. Do you remember more details about those tickets? What wasn't? Or was it just it looked like a ticket, but could you tell what was written on those tickets? Or was there anything written on those tickets at all?
I couldn't see what was written on them. I knew that I knew. It was that knowing, again, and that now I know is the way the Lord speaks to me. But I knew that they were of the highest importance. They carried a message, and I don't know if it was written or what it was, but they each were very special. They were like just the utmost importance, and they were revered, and they were looked highly upon, very highly upon. And they each carried a message to the Father, but I don't know how that was in them, but they each did have a message from his children, and so they carried a lot of weight. They were very special and very important where I was. Yeah. I don't know where I was. I don't think I was in heaven. I don't. But I was in a place in the presence of the Lord.
So it's kind of like an in-between, so to speak, right?
Yeah. However, I don't believe like in a purgatory or something. I don't believe in that. But I don't think it was on the earth, and I'm not convinced it was heaven either, because I think I would recognize, or I would know,
So it's like some kind of neutral territory.
Yeah. It was just a place. It was like we were on a picnic, just me and him, and we were just talking, and told me things, showed me things. Some of it I knew, some of it made, I was able to bring back, and some of it, most of it I was not, but it definitely had impact on me.
It's interesting how he said, these are the prayers of my children, right? And then he point out the other prayers. These are prayers for you, that people were praying for you. And I couldn't help but think of people that don't have anybody praying for them. How sad. And I look at prayer different after talking to you. I've been telling everybody at work, everyone I meet, telling them about your story, about how you saw those prayers in heaven. They're like little receipts, right? When somebody prays, it's not just making noise. Something happens. It's like petition to heaven. And I remember my father-in-law telling me how when his father passed away, his parents passed away, or I think his father, he said he felt like prayers stopped, right? His father was a praying man. He prayed for him. He felt like there were prayers going up to heaven for him. And then after his passing, it's like it all just went, stopped completely, and he felt it.
Yeah, I experienced that myself. My grandparents, praise the Lord, he blessed me with the best possible examples of Christian life that I have ever seen in over 50-something years of being on this earth. And they just happen to be my grandparents. And I can relate to that, because when my grandfather passed away, and a couple of years later, my grandmother did. They were married 73 years, and and they always put God first. Always. They were great examples to myself and the rest of my family. But I felt like there were less prayers for me after my grandfather died. Then after my grandmother died, then I wondered if anybody was praying for me at all, really. I mean, they spent a lot of time praying. So, I'm so blessed to have had them in my life. That scripture, Vlad, about raise a child up the way they should go, and when they grow old, they won't depart from it. And that was so true in my case. I never left the Lord or, decided I was not going to believe in him or anything like that. There was definitely a lot of room for improvement. And, I'm so grateful now for the experience because I now have that personal relationship. I feel like I know who he is, what his personality is about, what he's, what makes him happy, what makes him sad, what makes him tick, like we know about relationships with each other on the earth, that those things you know about somebody if you really know them, what their favorite things are, what their, favorite food is, I didn't know that was even really possible.
I remember on the phone speaking with you and you were saying how you kind of sort of read the Bible before, but after this whole experience, it was like a totally different shift. Can you elaborate more on that?
Well, I've read my Bible occasionally before, but it was more because I knew I should. I knew I was supposed to. It was more of a duty or a chore that I needed to do once in a while. But I'm ashamed to say that I didn't look forward to it. It was a lot of words that really meant not much to me. I didn't really grasp the context of, the scripture within the context of what I was reading, and all the these and those and thous and just, their different way of speaking when the Bible was written that I didn't really, some of it I got, most of it I didn't, and I had no desire to really delve in deeper to find out what it meant, whereas now I really look forward to that, and I'm learning so much in the scriptures. And if there's something that I don't really get or understand, I look it up. I go to the concordance. I, find out the meaning of the original word and things like that. And to me now it's exciting. It's our history. It's our past, and it's our Father, and it's getting to know what matters to him. So.
It's like I tell my kids that they can't live on my revelation, right? I come from a third world country. Well, Ukraine, I don't know what is it, second, third world country. So I grew up very poor, family, 9 kids. I remember having to share toothbrushes growing up. It was rough, right? My father was an underground pastor in Kiev, Ukraine, persecuted. And now I have 2 sons. One is about to be 9 this month, and the second one is 12 almost. And sometimes we'll be eating a steak, and like, I don't want a steak, and I'm like, man, you don't even know how good you have it. Like, you don't even know. And I can tell them all day long how blessed they are to have what they have. That they don't have to take turns to go outside to play because they don't have they only have one pair of shoes like we did in Ukraine. We had to take turns to go outside because we didn't have enough shoes for everybody. But one day, as I was complaining, I was like, man, you boys are so spoiled. Like, oh my gosh, one day I'm going to send you to Ukraine to your relatives, and you're just going to, when you come back to this soil, you'll be kissing this soil because no air conditioning there. No. But all day long, I can tell them how good they have it. But unless they have their own revelation, right? It's kind of like, sometimes you got to hit rock bottom. Sometimes you have to have that kind of experience so you can have a revelation. So, because sometimes somebody's revelation, they share it with you, and doesn't hit you the same way because you didn't go through the same things, right? So you can't really live on their revelation until it becomes your revelation. It's useless. It's information without application. It's just entertainment. And so for you, this experience, do you feel like you needed that experience to kind of have a different perspective on life?
Absolutely. I had a lot of time to, and I still do. I go over in my head, I just can't believe that he chose me to have that experience. So I'm so thankful for it. But I think, over my life, if I look back, there were several things, several times I had to rely on him. That was all I had. I couldn't reach into the spiritual realm and save my husband, or, I relied on the Lord, during those times. But the problem was, I think, is then after the tragedy ended, that was kind of the end of my intimacy with the Lord at that time. And I don't think it was intentional. I had to be a single mom, had 3 girls to raise. I had worked 7 days a week, so it was easy to just kind of let, that was something that I could, put in the background, and focus on what I thought was important right now. But now I realize, I put him first, and the other things will they'll fall into place. I just try to be a light in the darkness. And I think if I'm representing Jesus and I'm calling myself a Christian, then I better be representing him well, because if I stumble or I say a cuss word or I get angry at somebody and not acting like a Christian, then people are watching you when you claim to be a Christian, and they watch to see how you handle different things. And so, it's a challenge, but with the Lord's help, I'm improving. So, yeah.
We're all a work in progress, right? Well, I'm curious, did you ever doubt this experience?
No, I never doubted it. I doubted that I was capable of telling everyone, I thought to myself, how am I going to do that? I only know so many people. And, so then I thought, well, I'll start writing it, or something. But no, I never doubted it. But I think some people that I've told do, and that's okay, because if it means something to one person or helps one person or encourages one person to have that personal relationship, then, it's all been worth it. One soul is precious to him. And, if I can reach one soul, then it's all worth it. I had to learn to walk again and talk again. I couldn't sit up on the edge of my bed. It took all my strength, Vlad, just to hold my head up. It's amazing how fast your physical body loses muscle when you don't use it. So it's been a real challenge. It's been a real challenge physically, but I'm so grateful for it. And the spiritual warfare and the spiritual things that happen are so real. And I just wonder why more pastors and more churches don't better equip their congregations with the knowledge of how to deal with that kind of stuff. I don't know. Now, maybe I'm sure there are churches out there that do, but not any of the ones I've ever attended, and I just wonder why, when that's such a important aspect to our Christian walk in this day and age, especially.
Yeah. I've had Carl Falcon on the show, and he was talking about just that the churches are not equipping people to battle. Not a lot of people know that there's such thing as a spiritual warfare, right?
Right. Yeah. That's only something I heard of in the last few years, or so.
And speaking of spiritual warfare, that nurse that walked into your room and whispering things. So I know you mentioned that the nurse whispered things. So from what you said, it sounded like there was positives, so certain positive things. Did the nurse also say, threaten to kill you as well?
I don't think so. I actually blocked a lot of it out because I just thought it was so creepy. And that's part of why I know it was a demon, is because, I knew later. At the time, I thought it was a nurse. And when I woke up, that was one thing I told my family was, or I communicated to them. I didn't tell them anything because I couldn't speak, but finally was able to convey to them that I was begging them, please don't let that male nurse back in here. He hates me. He wants to kill me, and I knew he did. I knew it. He looked normal, looked like a normal person, wore blue scrubs. He had my husband's face, which is really, I think that was an attempt to gain my trust or something. And he never said anything negative, never touched me, never physically hurt me. But I knew he wanted to, Vlad, and I knew if he could, he would, and he would take great pleasure in doing so if he could. And I knew it, so that's partly why. And what I realized later was, looking back on it, because I prayed about it when I got home. I wasn't sure what that was about. My family had no idea. They said, Mom, we don't know who you're talking about. And I was like, duh, the one that looks just like my husband, I can't miss him. They never saw him. When I started getting better, Vlad, he never came back. Never saw him again. After I woke up, he never came back. And I think he was there to make one last attempt to deceive me, to trick me into trusting him, because the enemy didn't know if I was going to die. Everything said I was going to die. The doctors said I was going to die. All of the scientific testing and stuff that they did all said she was a goner. But the Lord knew I was going to live. So that's why he was there. I believe that's why he was there. And the enemy will deceive you, lie to you, appear as an angel of light, and I believe that's why they thought I was going to die too. So they were making one last attempt to get my soul. And I wonder how many people that have encountered something similar on their deathbed, and we don't hear about it because they died.
Thanks for watching. This was just a short clip from the full episode of God's Voice Today podcast. And if you want to see the full interview, it should be coming up on the screen right now. Until next time, have a great rest of the day. And I look forward to serving you and getting to know you more inside of our free private community over at family.godsvoicetoday.com. Talk soon. Bye-bye.